Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Guru Dev, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to our 51st live stream. We're doing chapter 6, verses 40 through 44 today via the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is, 1972 Mac Deluxe Edition. Join me or not in a few mantras to show respect to the higher personalities and higher powers and higher literatures. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. That was a great example of why I only do 2 mantras, because I still mess it up sometimes. And I really don't want to be like the other people who make Sanskrit pronunciation errors. That's a big mistake. Pronunciation is very, very important in Sanskrit. Very, very important. A lot of times more important than even understanding what you're saying. It's a very spiritually potent language, which works in large part due to pronunciation and human anatomy. All right, let's get to it. 640. The Blessed Lord said, "Son of Purta, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil." So this is the first response by Sri Krishna to Arjuna's question, what happens to people who start down this path of yoga and then fail or give up for some reason? And Arjuna was quite distressed, because he was like, if I start renouncing everything and then I lose, well, then I lost all my wealth and I don't have spiritual bliss or anything either. So I become a total loser, right? And Krishna's immediate response is, the key in this verse is 2 things. One, you are not met with destruction. So as far as the direct answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna isn't really saying, oh, don't worry, nothing bad at all will happen, because you can still suffer and struggle, but not be destroyed. So what Krishna is saying initially is there's no reason to despair. Although, yes, once again, Krishna's being a good teacher and he's indicating that Arjuna asked a good question. Like, Arjuna, you're on the right path. Like, yes, like you don't want to fail. There are consequences for failing, but don't despair. It's not as bad as you think it is. And then the second part is, never overcome by evil. Being destroyed, and being overcome is much similar things, but evil is a strong word here. Let's see what that word evil is in Sanskrit. I'll just read the word for word translation. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, I think you guys know what that means. Partha. Never is it so in this material world, never in the next life, destruction. Never in the next life, destruction, his exists. So he's never destroyed in the next life. Never, certainly never, one who is engaged in auspicious activities, anyone is degradation thereafter going, is never degraded. So Krishna literally says in the Sanskrit, you're never degraded by, even if you do fail and you give up, you don't go down. You don't lose anything. It's just that you don't, you know, you miss out on a lot of potential gain, but you don't lose anything. And then, of course, Prabhupada's English translation is much stronger. It's much more reassuring. It's much more positive. It's much more loving than what Krishna says. My friend, capital M, is never overcome by evil. I'm not saying it's a bad translation either. It's excellent. And once again, it's a good reason why I recommend most beginner readers to the Bhagavad Gita to just read the English translation. Don't worry too much about the Sanskrit, and don't feel like you absolutely need to read every single line of the purport. It's great if you can, but if you don't and you read just the verses and you read them appropriately with respect and from a sense of acceptance and inquisitiveness, you're in a very good position, and you can read the whole Gita very quickly that way too. And after you finish it, then you can read it again and go deeper. And this is still true for advanced readers too, by the way. You can just have a try. Just read the Gita beginning to end, no purport nor Sanskrit, just pure English translation as it is, and just see how you like it. You'll probably like it quite a lot. Yes, evil is a strong word. And even in this more positive, reassuring translation by Prabhupada, it still indicates linguistically and logically that there may be evil. There may be some reactions to failure / giving up, but you won't be overcome by that. You'll still be protected, which it seems is true. Also worth noting is there's quite a long purport for this verse, a page and a half, which once again to me indicates this is a significant verse. This may be the primary verse. Yeah, this is especially when you see the Sanskrit of it, this is the verse that Prabhupada and others refer to quite a lot when they say any work you do in devotional service and any benefit you gain is kept forever. And you never go lower than that point, basically. Although you can still have many sufferings and sinful reactions. But when you're ready to keep on going, you just continue where you left off. I think it's 640, this verse in particular, which definitively states that. And so another thing Krishna is saying here is that because this path is so good, just taking a few steps on this path does provide a lot of protection. And it's not really you who's done such a great job that you're rewarded. And perhaps it's not Krishna either. It's not that Krishna is taking a very particular, he's putting away all his other work and duties and pleasures and looking just, one more person has made one tiny step. I mean, I think that is happening to some degree, but it's more that it's just the structure of the psychology and the spirituality of what happens when a soul starts engaging in this work. It's just such a noble, good, sattvic, potent path that, there's a lot of good energy that resonates and attracts to souls on this path. It's like you become a magnet for goodness, and that magnet will also naturally repulse evil and darkness. Krishna may also be hinting at the fundamental nature of divine versus evil, like theologically in this verse, in the sense that the divine always wins in the end. When he says you're never overcome by evil, It means evil never wins. Basically, in general, evil just never wins. The divine always wins in the end, but yes, it is rare and it is difficult. And that's why we don't live in a divine world, meaning, even in a better age. I mean, in Kali Yuga on planet Earth, it's very obvious that the world is wicked. It should be obvious to many people. But still, everything is part of God. So, but it's hard to see that. It's totally true and it's totally there, but you have to clean the dirt off the lens of your perception to perceive it. The first paragraph of the purport states much the same as the verse, with an addition in the last sentence. Let's read that now. So I'll read the last two sentences. Even though he may be subjected to the reaction of not perfectly executing prescribed duties, he is still not a loser, because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten, and one so engaged will continue to be so even if he is lowborn in the next life. On the other hand, one who simply follows strictly the prescribed duties need not necessarily attain auspicious results if he is lacking in Krishna consciousness. I wonder if Prabhupada was thinking about his disciples, his American disciples, when he was writing this. Because but also many Hindus I've met. This is just a universal problem you meet with so many devotees, Christians, Muslims also. You get attracted enough for whatever reason, and you do the rituals, but then you get kind of attached to the rituals and you forget the God that's in the ritual. And you just do the ritual, and then, someone in your church temple community says, "Oh, wow, you're doing it more than the other ones. You're more advanced." They start honoring you, and it feels good. So you think that's bliss. It's not. That's just Maya. But this is a trap. This is why some people can spend years and decades of their life in, quote, devotional service, unquote, and not actually gain much at all in terms of Krishna consciousness, because they're not actually practicing Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not a set of rules and rituals. That's not what it is. It's a consciousness. Krishna consciousness is a kind of consciousness built on principles of action and study. And you have to follow those principles. Hopefully following the rules perfectly all the time. But if not, that's totally okay. There's many cases where people don't intentionally break the rules, but just based on their individual circumstance and how they just are doing Krishna consciousness, Krishna bhakti, there's certain rules that are broken. This happens. This is quite natural. When you're just beginning and you've never heard of tilak, you're not going to put on tilak. Are you punished in hell for not doing something you were nescient about? No. There's many, many rules and regulations and many shastras that we just don't know about. And we're not, 100% punished all 100% of the time for not doing, every tiny little thing. The heart is the important thing. The superficial things are less important. It's that simple. Just as when you're dealing with a person, you will try to respect their heart, their mind, and their soul the most, and their external body, is less important. That you should try and do that. It's the same with Shastra. There is a heart in Shastra. There is a heart in Srila Prabhupada. And following Srila Prabhupada and following the Shastra means really seeing that the essence of it and following and keeping that essence. and following it, knowing that there are many particulars that you're going to get wrong or you just can't do because of your circumstances. But if you keep the heart with you, your heart with their heart, yoga, you can make some progress. Huge mucus buildup. Sorry for that, folks. It's one benefit of doing a live stream that no one comes to. And then I wrote here, the next purport is really interesting, perhaps mean, but quite practical, how Prabhupada cuts all people into two categories. Yeah, the next part of the purport. So humanity may be divided into two sections, the regulated and the non-regulated. And then basically the non-regulated, they're animals. They may be civilized or non-civilized, educated or non-educated, but they're full of animal propensities because they're just following, daily feelings. They're just being swept along by the weather. But those who are regulated, those who are following the path of auspiciousness, can be divided into three sections. One, the followers of scriptural rules and regulations who are enjoying material prosperity. Two, those who are trying to find out the ultimate liberation from material existence. And three, those who are devotees in Krishna consciousness. And then he goes deeper into the first category. That may be further divided into two classes, those who are fruitive workers and those who desire no fruit for sense gratification. So that's basically exactly where I am. I'm in the first category where I'm following rules and regulations and studying, and I'm enjoying material prosperity. That's one reason I came to Korea. But I don't have a desire, I don't have a strong desire for fruit. I don't want to, and I also don't want to say I wish I had less material prosperity or anything, but I'm also not totally rich either. But I know for having the life I chose where I get to teach students, I get to continue my work very well. The students benefit a lot. And I get to do judo, which helps me in bhakti. And, part of living in this environment means, yeah, I'm surrounded by sense gratification, temptations all the time. And I do succumb to it more than sometimes. But I'm here every week. I still follow, once again, the essence of Krishna consciousness. And this is a short-term circumstance. After 2 or 3 years, I will probably leave Korea to never return. That is probably what will happen. Or maybe sooner than that. Who knows? But I'm not in the third category. Because if I was a devotee in Krishna consciousness, I would stay to the original realization I had, which is, of course, totally in line with Prabhupada, that the whole world is broken. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can practice Krishna consciousness anywhere. And the most important thing we're supposed to do right now in the 2020s and beyond is live simply on the land, protect the cows, and so on. And I, as an American citizen, have many opportunities to do that. And maybe I will do that once I get my black belt and get out of here. I may do just that. 1 second, please. Gnarly. Okay, let's go to 41. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Lovely, lovely verse. Very simple, very easy to understand, very reassuring. It's 100% in line with the previous verse and just elaborating further into detail. Once again, standard teaching technique that Krishna is doing excellently here. So, unlike most other religions, Krishna says here explicitly that those who make some attempt at this religion and fail actually are enjoying in heaven for many years. You don't get that in the Catholic Church and probably not most Muslim communities. No, you really have, it's not just like there's a very high standard for following the rules and regulations, and not just a high standard, but it has to be maintained for many years just to have some kind of chance for redemption, salvation, whatever. Now, Krishna is not saying that, to be a sahajiya, but he's saying that whatever you do counts and you're not degraded after that point. And if you just sincerely try a little bit and fail within one, very short human lifetime, you get another chance, bro. There's many other chances. Come on. I mean, part of this is just, comes from a solid understanding of reincarnation. And that's, what's very lacking in the Abrahamic faiths. But when you fully get that there's just many, 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 many births likely before and after this current one, you'll get another chance. And but because this path is so noble and holy and righteous, you're going to have to be rewarded for your good work. You're going to have to suffer the consequences of heaven for many, many years, which may be a curse for some people. Maybe they'll have many years on heaven enjoying great pleasures, and then they're born into a rich family, and then they just want more cushy comfortableness. And then in that whole next lifetime, they don't pick up the process again. And then they have to be born again to maybe a slightly less wealthy family. But because they don't have as much comfort, then they're agitated, and then they start looking for the path, and then they find the path again, that second birth or third birth. Many different possibilities like that can happen, right? Once again, this is just comes from a solid understanding and acceptance of reincarnation. And once again, we have two categories introduced by Prabhupada. The unsuccessful yogis can be either fallen after very little progress or fallen after long practice of yoga. Now, he doesn't actually talk about someone who falls after a long practice of yoga. But yes, you can, your next birth after enjoying on heaven is come back here in a very nice, on the earthly plane, in a human body, in a great situation. Probably good health, and many other things like that. Last sentence. Those who are born in such families may take advantage of the facilities and try to elevate themselves to full Krishna consciousness. Keyword may. That's going to be significant with the next verse, which talks about one higher level of a person. So once again, as I just said, just because first, you're never degraded. Whatever good work you do in Krishna Bhakti, it stays with you forever. Second, if you stop on the path and you don't finish it in this lifetime, you go to heaven, you enjoy, you come back, and you try again with a really good opportunity, but you may not take advantage of that opportunity. It says may. You may take advantage of those facilities, or you may not. Doesn't mean you lose all that bhakti. No, you maintain it forever. It just means you might need to take a few more births. You may need to suffer. You may need to just enjoy a bit more, which means suffer a bit more. And eventually that suffering will boil up to the top. You go, screw this, man. I don't want this crap anymore. I want something real. And then you'll get it. And then the game begins again. You finish that final boss. You go to the next world until you go to the next final boss. And it just goes on like that over and over again. Just like in video games. This is a video game. This simulation we're in, it is a video game. That's what it is. Let's go to 42. Or he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Verily, such a birth is rare in this world. So this birth is different from the previous one we were talking about. Being born in a rich family or an aristocratic family doesn't necessarily mean that, you're guaranteed spiritual life and yoga right away. It just means you have a very good opportunity to continue that process if you choose to. But you also have very good opportunity to, start a great business or do a bunch of material stuff if you want to as well. So it's still ultimately up to you. But basically being rich or aristocratic means you have, higher social access, social capital, instead of, being at the end of the line and applying for something and then being rejected just because of your last name or something like that. You're at the front of the line and people will come to you looking for favors, and people will ask you they'll recruit you. You don't have to apply as much to be accepted by them in many different contexts, but it's still up to you. But this birth in 42, this is different. This is being born to a family transcendentalist means your parents may be rich or they may be poor. It's beyond that. It's transcendental. So, but when you're in a birth like that, you will get from birth almost guaranteed a thrusting back onto the process of yoga and transcendence, kind of whether you want to or not, consciously. But unconsciously, I believe it's understood that you do want that. And that's why you're given that birth. You are simply given what is needed and desired of you via karma. The word Prabhupada uses in the first sentence of the purport is spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. So what I said may have been a little bit stronger than that, a little bit more of a logical stretch, that you almost definitely will become engaged in that, although there's always free will involved. But anyway, and then he says, this is especially the case in the Acharya and Goswami families. And there's a very sweet note Prabhupada says in here about himself. I'll read it. But first he says, in India, there are many such Acharya families, but they're now degenerated quite a lot. But by the grace of the Lord, there are still families that foster transcendentalists generation after generation. And it's very fortunate to take birth in such families. Fortunately, both our spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pad Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self have the opportunity to take birth in such families by the grace of the Lord. And both of us were trained in the devotional service of the Lord from the very beginning of our lives. Later on, we met by the order of the transcendental system. Very sweet note. I would read that again if I wasn't suffering right now physically, kind of losing my voice and don't want to cough too much. Verse 43. On taking such a birth, he again revives the. Let's try this again. I'm going to put more bass. On taking such a birth, he again revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. I put no notes here as I was reading this, and it's a really short purport. And I think that's because it's obvious, meaning if you've read the past two verses and the purport and you're working through it and understanding it as I have and as I've been sharing in this live stream, this verse here is self-evident. It should be mostly obvious. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about King Bharat, who is a good example of this, the king and the emperor of the world. But he wanted he wanted God. So he had to take, as king, he couldn't finish it in that lifetime, so he had to take another birth, and he had another chance after that. Jai Bharat Maharaj. Finally, verse 44. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist striving for yoga stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but if you're like me and you're reading that, the last phrase that really sticks out. And it's worth noting that Shabda Brahma, which means Prabhupada word for word translates it as ritualistic principles of scripture. And in the translation, it's exactly the same. Is a beautiful translation, but you can't take it too literally because a ritual and a principle are contradictory. They're not really the same thing. So anyway, he clears it up in the purport perfectly in what is it, the first sentence? Yeah, the first sentence. So Prabhupada says there's the rituals of the scriptures on one hand, and then the principles of yoga on the other hand. And that's really the key distinction here. Rituals are just rituals. They're just methods and techniques. And if you don't apply them properly, you won't benefit, and your master will get a little impatient with you. This has been happening with me in judo class, where when we do drills, I'm really good at following instructions and, I can do it pretty well. But then in sparring time, especially for how much physical strength I have compared to the other people, I'm very what's the word? Not incompetent, but I'm very ineffective at utilizing that technique when it really counts. I noticed one of my teachers, he's like, come on, Alex, he's starting to kind of lose hope in me a little bit. And the same thing happens in spiritual life. If you do even if you're very sincere and you're practicing the rituals very well, if you're not getting the end with which the rituals are the means, if you're not actually winning from that, we're going to start getting impatient. We're going to say, come on, bro, you got to make something happen here. You got to put your heart into it. That's what take it seriously means. It means literally put your heart into it. Shraddha. You don't have Shraddha. That's why you're not letting the ritual work. There's an unconscious part of yourself which is self-sabotaging. And here, now Krishna explains explicitly what in even much better words than I had just said a few moments ago. I'll read it again. he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. That's what I meant when I talked about, being born to like great Vaishnavacharya parents. You learn from birth this devotion. So, and because children are so, impressionate, what is it? Impressionable. They may actually resist a little bit, even though you're a great soul, have had done great things in your past life. There may be times when you're like, "Oh, Dad, I don't want to do the prayer now," or whatever. But it doesn't matter because you're advanced enough, and your parents are advanced enough where it's no problem. The mercy is there, the grace is there. Whatever small hiccup is there, no problem. And then before you know it, you're 10 years old, 12 years old, doing brahmachari life, and everything's good. This is happening automatically, without seeking it. Once again, Krishna says it better than I can. If you're enjoying heaven and then you're born in a wealthy family, you're not going to automatically seek yoga. You may have a propensity to, and you may have many good opportunities and a lot of free time to engage in that. That was my current lifetime. I had so much free time growing up to do my own studies, and I took advantage of that. I was reading philosophy by myself in high school, and it took me to get to this particular yoga. It took me 25 years, but as far as coming to some kind of yoga, some kind of real impactful wisdom practice, which I would call the ethos by Aristotle, that took me 16 years to get to. So, and it wasn't automatic. I still, even though I did have that desire by birth, I still had to wait for my school, my parents, my synagogue to get me into that position where I could finally get a master I could submit to, who was Aristotle. But it wasn't but I had the desire since birth. I actually had automatically by birth, I had the desire to do everything I'm doing now, but I wasn't good enough to be born into Vaishnav parents, right? So I still, in this particular case, I had to wait, and it involves suffering too. And it's not just waiting. There's fortune involved. If I went to a slightly different school where that philosophy class wasn't offered, then I might have had to wait till 20 years old or 22 years old. There's a lot of grace involved as well. That's my situation. That's basically what I wrote in my notes there. Now, the last sentence of this verse really exemplifies such a great birth and also indicates how others who may not have such a great birth, but who within one lifetime become advanced enough, may act in a similar way. And once again, we're talking about ritualistic scriptural practice. So many examples from Prabhupada cheated a lot according to the strict rules of Shastra. A lot of people don't want to admit this or don't know it, but he took female disciples. There are many other, probably many other cases I could think of, but I only need that one to make this point, because it's when you live in India and Asia for a long time and you see how careful they are with gender relations and traditional family values and stuff like that, that was a very big deal. Being an elderly man taking 20-year-old female disciples in the hundreds and thousands, this is what all the fake gurus were doing. And here's a real guru doing the same thing, which is directly, definitively against the rules. There's no getting around that. Even, I would imagine maybe if like Govinda Dasi or one of the great female Prabhupada disciples is listening to this, they're getting triggered right now. Listen to this, but try to be rational, okay? I'm not saying Prabhupada's bad. I'm saying Prabhupada's very good. And that's why he did this, because he was acting from heart, from the essence of Krishna consciousness, which is simply to distribute Krishna consciousness. And that's what he did. Man, woman, child, white, black, whatever. It's just like Jesus Christ did. It's the same exact thing. And I guess the main difference was because, Jesus was doing this in the Jewish time, place, and circumstance. And back at that time, there were many great Pharisees, rabbis who could instantly quote the regulations. You've broken the rule, even though you've cured the blind, you've done a bad thing. In America, his disciples, he was in a different environment, Prabhupada was. So there was no, he had to go back to India to be hassled by his godbrothers. But yeah, obviously it worked. I mean, talk to any female Prabhupada disciple. What are they going to say? Oh, I wish he didn't initiate me. Oh, I wish he didn't, come in my life. No, they'll never say that. Are they going to say, oh, he was a fake guru and he touched me in a bad way? No, none of them will say that because it didn't happen. But once again, technically, rules are rules and rituals are rituals. And, but when you're advanced enough, you may not follow them all the time and you may have to break them from time to time. But that doesn't mean, that you read this verse and you use it as an excuse to go, have illicit sex or something, or just do what you want. It only works if it's genuine. Krishna consciousness is real and it works. So if that's what you're doing, you're all good, bro. If you're doing something else in the name of Krishna consciousness and using ritual as a way to protect yourself socially, ethically, karmically, and so on, you may be a demon or, have demonic propensities or whatever else, sinful, wicked, whatever word you want to use. Now, the literal translation is a little confusing. It says ritualistic principles of scripture. I already said this, yeah, but a ritual and a principle are not the same. And in fact, they're kind of self-contradictory. Yep, I already talked about this. Yep. Oh, and there is a typo here. Here in our favorite 1972 Deluxe Macmillan edition. In the final paragraph in the purport, although Thakur Haridas happened to take his birth in a Muslim family, Muslim is spelled wrong. Just want to bring this to your attention because it doesn't matter. This is just like the thing I said about a second ago about Prabhupada initiating female disciples. It's technically wrong. Just like Muslim is technically not spelled Moslem. That's technically incorrect. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. If you're reading this through, just how I read it just now, I was literally just reading it as it is. I wasn't putting my own anything on it. Maybe if you want to pronounce it perfectly, it'd be Muslim instead of Muslim, but it's obvious what he's talking about. It's so obvious within the context. If you have some basic middle school intelligence, you know what Prabhupada is talking about. But yes, to make it perfect, yeah, it'd be nice if it was spelled correctly. And that's what that's what Prabhupada told his disciples to do. He authorized them and perhaps even requested them to edit these small, minor, insignificant typos. Looking back in hindsight, I think we'd all agree it would have been better if Prabhupada just said, no editors, period. You're all fired. Keep the typos. The typos are great. They're beautiful typos. These are typos from Krishna. In hindsight, that would have been better. Doesn't mean I'm fault finding Prabhupada because I can sense that, he was taking compassion on his disciples who wanted to have a very important service, which it certainly is. But, his disciples just weren't mature enough in a lot of different ways. They weren't mature enough to do that task properly. So we have to do better, period. That's what evolution means. Real evolution, not scientific evolution. But I mean, each generation of disciple has to maintain the essence and the fundamentals of the wisdom practice, but be willing to constantly change and deal with time, place, and circumstance and all the details that don't matter. You have to constantly see the details that don't matter and treat them as the details that don't matter. And that's why, and because we're not doing that, that's why when I go to ISKCON Korea, it's all Hindu people. And there's like no white people, no black people, one or two Koreans. It's because they're caring too much about all these particular details that don't matter. If they were really in tune with the heart of Krishna consciousness, then there'd be many people. It'd be just like when Prabhupada was around. You'd have, everyone wants to, have some good prasadam, chant some awesome kirtan. Everyone wants to do that. That being said, it is harder to have this kind of personal, lovey-dovey kind of religion in Korea and Japan. You're very cold, very impersonal people. So it is hard. But there's many foreigners like me who are working here as English teachers who are, miserable. Oh, I need something to, get me through my work day. And, they can, if you're willing to preach to them as we did back in the 60s and 70s, they'll say, yeah, I'll come by Sunday for a free vegetarian meal. Why not? I can take the metro there? Sure, bro, I'll see you there. It's not that hard. But, when people mess it up so severely, those of us like myself who want to help out, it becomes harder and harder for me to associate with those people, with all sorts of different kind of people. It just becomes more difficult. That's why I like my kindergartners, because they're good people. They're not fanatic. They're not old enough to learn how to be stupid and immature. I mean, children are immature, but in an innocent way. That's very easy to be merciful to them about. Now, the proper understanding of this, when you see someone like Haridas Thakur or Srila Prabhupada, who does not follow the rituals perfectly, but has great results, Palina Parichite, great results in their preaching, in their bhakti, it is to be understood, quote, that in his previous life he must have passed through all the ritualistic methods of the Vedas known as Shabda Brahman. Unless, therefore, one is purified, one cannot take to the principle of Krishna consciousness, nor become engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna. Next time we will continue with verse 45. And that will be our 52nd live stream. Thanks for tuning in. Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Bhagavan. See ya.